Hello and welcome to The World Today. With me in the studio is Thomas Frank, distinguished American radical journalist whose books, Pity the Billionaire and especially What's the Matter with Kansas, had a huge impact on thinking in the United States, especially at these times when the mainstream press effectively is in hock either to the corporations or the political class. So Thomas Frank is one of those rare creatures still left who asks critical and searching questions. And since he was in London and since we're in the middle of the US elections, we thought talking to Thomas Frank would be extremely educative, both for audiences in South America and, of course, those who watch this show online in other parts of the world. Tom, welcome, and congratulations on your new book. But before we turn to the book, which we will discuss in detail, what is your opinion on what's going on in the States? I mean, the fact it appears, I mean, it seems obvious, but one can never be sure that Trump is going to lose. And yet, he is the person all over the world, Europe, Africa, Asia, on whom attention is focused, whereas Senator Clinton or Secretary Clinton is virtually ignored. People know who she is, they don't like her, or they like her, whatever the reasons, but Trump is the one on whom attention is concentrated. Yeah. Why?
So if you go to the Washington Post at any time, I live in the suburbs of Washington, so that's my hometown newspaper now, and if you go to their website, on virtually any day for the last, 6 months, all of the top 5 most read, most emailed stories are going to be about Trump. People are absolutely obsessed with this man. I think there's a horror of him. People can't believe this is happening. But I think the kind of people that I live around, the people who read Washington Post, the people all over the world who follow American politics are just horrified. And it's only accelerated. So it's my metaphor is like, this is how many icebergs does this Titanic have to hit before it goes down? I mean, he's had blunder after blunder after blunder. And, he's basically shot all his toes off, He's down to one or two.
He still keeps going.
He still keeps going. He says he's not going to withdraw. People are going to vote for him. He's going to carry some states, which is, unthinkable. He's this kind of moral monster to all appearances who's going to carry some states. And so I think that's why people are obsessed. Yeah.
But the other side of him is this, the serious side, if we can call it that, which is that he has often attacked Clinton's dependence on Wall Street. He has attacked NAFTA. He has defended the interests of the poor white sections of the working class. He has said that he's going to reindustrialize the United States. So apart from the disaster side of him, in terms of what he's actually saying, surely that too must have an impact.
Yes. Well, what the 3 things that you just mentioned are what makes him, what has given him this following that he has. And let's not forget, he beat all the other Republican challengers. These were very mainstream Republicans, many of them. And he clobbered them. There is huge enthusiasm for this guy. So there is a movement out there behind Trump. Now, my feeling, and it's for exactly the 3 things that you just mentioned. And for listeners around, for viewers around the world, they need to understand something about, they think of America as this great economic behemoth. We are the preeminent economic power in the world. But for a lot of average Americans, it doesn't look like that. It feels like their way of life is coming apart. America has pretty much recovered. The stock market is doing great. The Wall Street banks are back. People on the top in America have enjoyed some of the best years they've ever had. For a lot of middle-class Americans, the kind of people that used to be, every politician would pander to them in the past, these people have seen, no recovery. They do polls all the time, and they ask people, one of the questions they always ask people is the recession over or is it still going on? And majorities of Americans say the recession is still going on. And because for them it is. And what's funny is American East Coast newspapers will often laugh at them for being so stupid, right? That they don't know the statistics. They don't know that, in fact, the recession technically ended in 2009. They still think it's going on. But their pain is very real to them. And Trump speaks to that. And all the things that you just mentioned are exactly right. And that's why he has the enormous following he has. He's saying things that are totally impermissible in American politics.
Tom, even looking at the primaries in which he trounced all the others, I mean, the confrontation with Jeb Bush that I remember was when he attacked Jeb Bush and the family for giving us the Iraq War.
Yeah.
And Bush couldn't reply and said, "You're attacking my pa."
Yes, that's right. And I'm very. It's interesting the way that question has been pretty much deleted from the debates with Secretary of Clinton, because they've now decided that no, Trump, he wasn't wholehearted in his opposition to the Iraq War. He waffled back in those days. Well, he wasn't a politician. No. He's still not really much of a politician, or he would know how to play this game. But they say, no, you weren't really against it. And so therefore, we don't have to answer any questions about it. But Secretary Clinton, I think, has a lot to answer for that one and on some other things. Basically, the American air war against Libya
was a disaster.
Well, look at that country now.
Yeah,
and that was her. She dreamed that up.
Yeah.
And there's a number of other things like that we need to have a good conversation on in my country,
and
we're not having it. Yeah, it's off the table. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're pretty sure, Tom, that Trump will be defeated.
I don't see how this latest videotape that's emerged, I don't see how he recovers from that. Women are 50% of the population, and it's deeply offensive to them. So even though, look, yes, he's going to lose. These are burning questions, and they're not going to be answered this time, and maybe not ever. This is how American politics works. We have the two-party system, and the system can be easily gamed. There's never been a more perfect example of the failures of the two-party system. That in the Democratic primary, they had a robust challenge from Bernie Sanders, and then there were other Democrats waiting in the wings who should have been in the race. But the Democratic Party, the machinery of the party, the office holders within the party came together to ensure, first, that Sanders lost, and second, that no other strong challengers to Clinton would emerge. They gave her the nomination because it's her turn. And now she's going to win the presidency because of the weakness of her challenger, which is this is an amazing situation. A deeply unpopular figure, and Hillary Clinton is deeply, deeply unpopular in America, is going to be president because one of the two parties chose her. This is democracy in action in the world's greatest democracy.
Exactly, and also the other odd fact, which I don't think has ever happened before, is virtually the entire Republican establishment has come out publicly and said that they're voting for Hillary.
Yeah, and they're opposing their own nominee. Yes, that's right.
I mean, that hasn't happened before, has
No,
it?
that never has. There's a lot of unprecedented things that are happening because of Trump. But a lot of them came out against him even before this latest outrage.
Yeah.
So I went to the Republican convention, and none of their standard bearers were there. Mitt Romney, John McCain, they were not there. None of the Bushes were there.
Well, the Bushes have said they're voting for the Clintons.
Oh, wow.
All of them.
Even George, even the recent... It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, they're very similar. Their views are very similar. I mean, George, they have these superficial differences. George W. Bush is this sort of bumbling fool.
But basically,
they have very similar ideas on a lot of things.
Okay, well, we'll see what will happen. But Tom, coming to your latest book, Listen Liberal, or Whatever Happened to the Party of the People, this is a sharp attack, critique of the Democrats. And I enjoyed it a great deal, and I'm sure many people will, because the big white hope, if you'll excuse the phrase, the last big white hope was Barack Obama. And I remember, as you probably do better than me, the enthusiasm by the young. It was not exactly on the same level as Sanders, but not too different.
Yeah.
That this is the guy who's going to do something for us. And as you point out, on virtually every single issue, he caved. That's if he ever had any intentions of doing the opposite in the first place.
Yeah.
But whether he did or not, he caved to Wall Street, he caved to the military-industrial complex. His foreign policy was effectively no different from that of Bush, as Bush himself said admiringly.
Well, there was one big difference, the Iraq War. And this is why Obama, one of the reasons that we loved him.
Yeah,
is
he
that
opposed it.
Yeah, he said
Yeah.
it was a stupid war.
Yeah.
And I love that bluntness. Remember the circumstances of 2008. The economy was in a state of collapse. And here comes this man who's so intelligent, who can speak so well, and who seems to know what's going on. And he gave wonderful speeches on this subject and on the Iraq War, which was
a big thing.
oh,
yeah.
just it's it's shameful to be an American when things like that. I mean, that we were anyhow. Well, the Iraq War, a terrible, terrible blunder. And here's a man who knew it was a blunder from the very first day. When he took office, the country was united behind him in a way that I haven't seen in my lifetime. They would have backed him in nearly anything. He becomes president. The great issue facing the nation: what to do about Wall Street. You know, these are the people that have, through fraud, have driven the world economy off the cliff. And we've just finished bailing them out with George Bush's, or his Treasury Secretary's plan to bail out the Wall Street banks, which is obscene. Everyone in the country is furious about this. And what does he do? He continues that policy. He continues the policy almost in its entirety for several years. So none of these people are ever called to account. They never got fired. Nobody ever got prosecuted, even though the fraud was obvious.
No, but Tom, the other thing is, I remember Ron Suskind, I think it was in his book, but it's elsewhere too, that when Obama called in all the Wall Street chiefs, the CEOs and the big bosses for this meeting, quite a few of them said to people, before we went in, we were really running scared. He's going to kick us where it hurts, and we just have to take it because, and this came out totally amazed.
Yeah, that's right.
Saying, he basically said, you're okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the Susskind book is an important account of those early days. It is the important account of the early days of the Obama administration. But the Wall Street executives fully thought that they were going to be taken to the woodshed, that they were going to get spanked. And the opposite happened. I remember Obama's famous remark on that occasion was, "I'm all that's standing between you and the pitchforks." That's what he said to the Wall Street guys. And all the other columnists at the Wall Street Journal thought, "Oh, this is terrible. He's threatening them. He's saying you have to, you have to do what I say, or else, But that wasn't it at all. He was saying exactly what he meant. Yeah, I am protecting you from the pitchforks, and they understood that. The Wall Street guys came out of that meeting and said, pretty much nothing changed, and that was only a month into his administration. By the way, and now we see that Hillary. Well, the Democrats' relationship to Wall Street exists thanks to Hillary's husband, Bill Clinton. Before Bill Clinton, the Democrats hated Wall Street. But Hillary's husband and Hillary herself have do the opposite. They've made great friends with Wall Street, and the Democrats in general now
are the party of Wall Street.
Yeah, which is an amazing shift. And then the Republicans, with Trump, of course, becoming the party of the white working class. Another extraordinary shift.
But in terms of this total capitulation to Wall Street, you sort of argue this point in the book, that effectively it was the New Democrats who pushed this through, yet I think you mentioned that too, it wasn't just them, even Carter had started on that path.
Carter was sort of the first of our neoliberal presidents. The policies that we often, as people on the left, that we often blame Ronald Reagan for, a lot of them actually began with Jimmy Carter. So the deregulation of all these different parts of the economy, that was Carter's big idea. Canceling a lot of sort of New Deal style programs. Carter did that in order to show this break with the past. And most importantly, he allowed Federal Reserve, in fact, encouraged them to run interest rates up to this. I mean, we're getting in the weeds here, but people remember this. They deliberately caused a recession in America, deliberately, in order to tackle inflation, and that got Reagan elected. It was a dumb move, but it was also a painful move for his very people. For the kind of people that voted for Democrats. But yeah, Carter was sort of the beginning of the turn, but it was Bill Clinton.
Bill
that really,
Clinton took it to its
to
logic.
fruition.
Yeah, he really did.
Yeah. And it's a different philosophy of government. I mean, we have to recognize that the Democratic Party has fundamentally changed. They serve a different group. They have a different philosophy. The way I put it in Listen Liberal, it's a kind of a reverse Marxism, where they have an idea of a hero class, a hero social class that is going to be the victors of history, the people standing at the end of the great dialectic. But it's not the working class.
No, it's the professionals.
The professionals, the creative class.
It's the Harvard, Yale.
Yeah.
It's the people who go to the Ivy League. For them, this is the class that will liberate America, and is doing so.
Yeah.
And you point out the links now with the IT companies, with Google. These are the new. I mean, there's Wall Street is there.
And Wall Street above all. I mean, Wall Street is looks bad these days. I mean, there's a reason that Hillary Clinton has tried to keep her association with them. She's tried to keep it secret. Wall Street for many years was preeminent. They had a term they like to use. Financial innovation. What made Wall Street so wonderful? It was financial innovation, because they could pluck wealth out of thin air, and they didn't pollute. They were writing these derivative securities, and nobody really understood how they worked, but we were all getting rich, because of their genius, because of those Harvard brains. But the most famous financial innovation was these securities based on mortgages, which turned out to be this disaster.
But the basic division that you point out in this new book is that effectively the Democrats have abandoned the labor movement, abandoned the American working class or middle class, whatever you call it, and that this is a big, big switch which has been going on for decades. And that instead of this, it's the professionals, it's the rich, it's people like them. And so the question, which is a burning issue now everywhere, but especially in large states like the United States, of inequality is hardly ever discussed.
Well, it's discussed, but it's always immediately fudged. So Obama gave an excellent speech about inequality, but inequality has gotten much, much worse while he's been president.
Exactly.
And it's not an issue that we ever confront squarely. If you ask me, what's the solution to inequality? The answer is really, really obvious. Working people need to have more power over the conditions of their employment. I mean, people have jobs in America, they just don't get paid very much. That sort of thing has been going down for decades. Why has it been going down? Because organized labor has basically been destroyed in the United States. Why has organized labor been destroyed? There's a lot of reasons, but one of the big ones is Bill Clinton and NAFTA, okay, and the various trade agreements that the Democrats have signed on to, which gave corporate management in America extraordinary power over workers.
And weakened the trade unions as a result, considerably.
Exactly. If you say we're going to go on strike, or we're going to form a union, or we have this grievance, here in the plant, the boss says, we're moving to Mexico. Now, whether he does it or not, whether he follows through or not is irrelevant. He's got that weapon, and they always give, they always surrender. I mean, that's the ultimate, that's the atom bomb, and he's got it thanks to Clinton. And then there's, the Democrats, the labor people still line up for the Democrats every November and turn over their treasury to the Democratic Party, and they do the get out the vote efforts for Democrats, and they work hard, and then they come to the Democrats after the election and they say, we have one demand. One thing we want your help with. We want you to make it easier to form a union in America again. We want to make it possible for people to organize again. And this happened with Obama. They had their one demand. He's like, oh, sorry, guys. He said he was in favor of it, but he would not do anything to get the legislation passed through Congress. Nothing. And it died. And they've got nothing.
But, Tom, earlier when we were discussing Obama and his speech at the convention not so long ago, you used a word about him. You said he was so smart. And in your book,
Yes.
you really lambasted people
who are smart.
who are smart, and because
Yeah.
this smartness is something that is used all the time
I
to
know.
justify everything
I
they're
know,
doing.
I know, and it's always that word too. Smart. She's so smart. He's so smart. Hillary is smart. You know, Barack Obama is smart. Bill Clinton is genius. You know, and look what's happened. But smartness. Wait, we didn't really get into this. This is fascinating, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm really interested in the. You know, with George Bush, we saw.
He wasn't smart.
No, that's right. We saw the folly of buffoons, right? Nothing surprising about that. You put this guy. You put. These sort of cranks in charge of things, and they put their friends in charge of agencies, and they run the agencies into the ground. And yeah, you know. So my feeling with Obama was, well, let's get the smart people in there, and they'll do it right. And what we've got instead is a long lesson in the folly of expertise. You know, that and by the way, the classic example of this is the Vietnam War. Do you remember this? That the people who dreamed up the Vietnam War and supported it were the people at the top of the academic hierarchy.
Yeah.
The political scientists, foreign affairs people who went to Lyndon Johnson and said, you know, we're winning this thing. Look at the body bags. You know, they had all the flow charts and the graphs, and they persuaded the nation to continue with this monstrous thing. And you sort of see a repeat of that in the Obama years, where he brings in, for example, Larry Summers, not just a great economist, but the president of Harvard. You know, and he brings in people like that. And if you look at who's in his inner circle of advisors, they're all, well, a very large number of them are Harvard people. And the rest are from other Ivy League schools. A surprisingly large number, went to Oxford, Rhodes Scholars. And that's who's advising President Obama. And it's like a meritocracy of failure. You know, it is fascinating to me that these people at the very top got the essential questions so wrong. And so the book is, a big part of Listen Liberal is me trying to understand why that is. And there is a good reason for it. I think it's just class identification. They look at the malefactors in this case, the people on Wall Street, people in Silicon Valley, the people who are doing these things to middle America, and they look at these people and they see peers, colleagues, classmates, you know, friends. And they excuse them and excuse them and excuse them, and they understand what these people are doing. And there's, I mean, famous statements just a little while ago in explaining why the Justice Department under Obama never prosecuted anybody on Wall Street. They said, well, you know, come on, these are good guys that made one mistake. You know, and somebody else said, you know, they're dealing in financial rocket science. You know, it's so admirable what they're doing. You know, it's too bad it didn't work out, but it is fascinating what's going on in that country this year. My country. I'm so proud of it this year.
Tom, the Sanders campaign was a big sign of hope. You know, just watching it, I mean, I was in the States for some of those events, but just sort of watching it regularly, listening to him, listening to other people on his platform, and you felt that there was something here which actually could defeat Trump in a very positive way.
Easily, yes. He would easily have beaten Trump.
And that he was beginning to attract some of the same people too. Not to the same extent, but he was appealing to working people, to the old labor movement, if you like, to a certain extent.
No, the labor people loved him, the rank and file, the leadership.
It was nervous.
They put their money down on Clinton very early in the game.
Yeah.
But I spoke to many labor people, and they loved Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Sanders was yes, I was hopeful about Sanders. I really liked what he was offering, and young people rallied. This was fascinating because he was the oldest of the candidates.
I know. We had the same thing here with Jeremy Corbyn in Britain. You know, except he won.
People often think Sanders is some kind. You know, he calls himself a socialist, and but in fact, in a lot of ways, he was a very familiar kind of figure. He was an old New Deal Democrat, but he's for me a familiar figure from a long time ago. And the way the Democrats reacted to him was very revealing. It was like an allergy. This was something from their past that they thought they had suppressed, that they would never have to deal with again. And here it comes, and you know, they just had zero tolerance for this guy. They lined up against him very, very early on. And his success shocked people, astonished people. And I think if he had played the game a little differently, he could have beaten her. Someone with Sanders' platform could easily be president of the United States, no question about it. He would have made short work of Donald Trump. For one reason, he's a man with no scandals, none of this kind of stuff, among other things.
Now, towards the end of your book, you say that there are, let me quote you. After this attack on the Democrats and their moral probity and many other things that have happened, you say the course of the party and the course of the country can both be changed, but only after we understand that the problem is us. Now, of course, the Sanders campaign showed that to a certain extent, but do you really think that this two-party system, because that's what we're talking about, it's not just the Democrats and Republicans, can be changed, or is there a real possibility that a third force could emerge for the first time for centuries?
Well, I'm very sorry to tell you that it almost certainly can't, because of the way the laws are written in America. So the two-party system is basically inscribed in law. And the only third-party challenges we've had have been presidential, celebrities or very rich people like Ross Perot, Teddy Roosevelt, Bob La Follette running for president, often from the left, Ralph Nader, but it's always just at the top. There is no national organization. The populists had governors and senators and members of Congress.
Why can't that be repeated on the state level?
I'm so sorry to tell you.
It can't be.
It would be very hard. You could try it. It's not for lack of trying. It's because the sort of electoral methods that they used in the 19th century. And by the way, there were lots of third-party movements in the 19th century. So the Republican Party started as a third-party movement. And third parties would typically rise up when the main issue of the day was being ignored. So in the case of slavery, the two main parties had come to some kind of consensus where they weren't. This wasn't on the table. And the Republican Party came on the scene and just exploded that. And then you have late in the 19th century where industrialization and that version of inequality wasn't being discussed. And they made one of the two parties adopt that, the Democrats in this case, adopt that issue. So third parties are a healthy part of a functioning democracy, and we don't have that choice anymore. And I think that's a terrible shame. In that absence, people have to work through the parties. And I would love to see, one of the things that, this is, well, I don't want to say it's hopeful, but you have seen in the Republican Party, it's not a hopeful sign, but it's an interesting sign, which is the Republican Party dragged to the right by a grassroots movement. So this is what I wrote about in What's the Matter with Kansas, these blue-collar people taking on the people who ran the establishment of the Republican Party in Kansas, who, by the way, happened to be sort of professional class. They were all at these big-name law firms and that kind of thing. These grassroots blue-collar people taking them on and overthrowing the Republican hierarchy in the state of Kansas. Now, the people they installed in their place are like some of the worst, leaders you've ever seen, and that state is it's a disaster now. But that sort of rebellion against a party hierarchy, there's something very refreshing about that. I would love to see that happen in the Democrats.
Last question. You wake up the morning after Election Day in the U.S., and despite everything you think and what the polls are showing, Donald Trump is the president of the United States. Will anything change?
Well, yeah, I'll be moving into your guest room. Yes, if Trump were president, oh my God. The thing is, Trump has said, as you mentioned at the start, he has promised, there are some good things that he says. And then there are a whole bunch of really awful things, like how he would change the tax code and that sort of thing. And he would be able to do the really awful things because he would have a Republican Congress that would allow him. I don't think they'd let him do the good things. So it's, that would be extraordinary. But it would be, wow, the world would be turned on its head. And I think in a pretty dreadful way. But we'll see.
Tom Frank, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.